I wanted to add that last part of Days of Elijah. I know that we've sang that song, and we haven't had the "There's No God Like Jehovah," who was, but I wanted to add that. That's a iteration that the Praise and Harmony group does, and I think it's powerful. I think it's powerful for us to proclaim words like that we're not used to proclaiming. I think it's important for us to say things that we're not used to saying when it comes to our proclamation of our devotion to, our belief in, and our desire to know God. And hopefully, and I know that we give a hard time to the worship songs of today that they have the over and over and over again. But I hope this week you find yourself, maybe it's just Tuesday at 10:47, and you just find yourself just sitting there typing away, sending an email, talking to Roger in accounting, and just thinking, "There's no God like Jehovah. There's no," just over and over and over again. Because guess what? There isn't. There isn't. There is no God like our God. But you know what we do? We try to come up with one. We try to come up with anything that can distract us away from the reality of life, whether that God be work or family or sport or money or career, whatever that God might be. This morning, as we talk about going through this living journey that we're on, and we talk about the junk that's in the trunk that as the Hebrew writer says, so easily entangles us and so easily slows us down, we're going to talk about dumping the despair, because that's one, like I said before, it's one of the things that is so much we want to be distracted away from, but the more that we try, the worse it gets. And so as we go through this sermon series, and we look in Psalm chapter 23, this is the 23rd Psalm is, somebody moved it in my Bible. I was just talking about this morning. The 23rd Psalm is one of those Psalms, or one of those Bible verses that gets a lot of airtime, right? It gets a lot of play on wall hangings, and I bet if you counted up all of the Psalm 23 cross stitch things hanging in homes across America, it would probably far outweigh any other cross stitchingness. But it's not just a chock full of quippy sayings and easy to memorize and maybe put to put a tune to it. It's the words of life, and it goes through what it means to live in this world and to be dependent on God, to be fully human and let God be fully God. And we've talked about that the Lord is our shepherd, and what it means to be protected and provided for, and to be guided by that, and to be sustained in all that He has. And He makes us to lie down. He gives us rest. Last week we talked about what it looks like to have our souls restored. To have the very nature of what we are and who we are restored. And then he goes on to say, He guides me in paths of righteousness for His name's sake. As one of the things that I'm studying right now, restudying, is all of the letters that Paul has written, because I'm teaching a class on Wednesday nights that you're all invited to, by the way, about Galatians, and it's spilling into the letters as a whole, because contextually they all kind of go together, because they're all kind of dealing with the same issue, just different people version of it. And I'm thinking about renaming that class from the Galatian letter or Paul's letters to the first century to just how many controversies can Shane stir up in a week is the new title of that class. But this is one thing that right here, this verse here, and this is, by the way, this is just for free. This isn't what you paid for this morning. He guides me in paths of righteousness. And this is what we're dealing with in the letters and what the problems become. It's for His name's sake, not ours. It's for His glory, not ours. It's so that He can be seen as who He is, and that is right, not so that we can beat somebody else over the head with our version of this, claiming our rightness. Like I said, that was for free, but I get fired up about that because it's these things we skip. It's these little things that we skip over that cause us so many problems, that make the church irrelevant in community. Because it's for His name's sake. He walks us through, He guides us through this righteousness, not so that we can be like, well, look at us. And you need to do, no, it's for His name's sake. We wear His name. We wear His name. It's not the other way around. Okay, so now this is what you paid for right here. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. This morning, as we go through this living journey, as we talk about dumping the despair, we have to talk about walking through this valley. Walking through this valley of death. Because all of us are doing that to one degree or another. There's this overall shadow of death that defines our life. And that is that these tabernacles, these tents that we live in, as Paul would say, they're not forever as they are now. They will be one day when He comes and He restores us to the original creation that He intended for us. And we will have our heavenly bodies or our new Jerusalem bodies that will last forever. But these we're in now, they don't. And that bugs us. It really does. But within that valley, there's other little valleys. There's lower valleys that are not only in the grand scheme of the valley of death that all of us, I mean, if you haven't noticed, there's a 100% mortality rate for being in one of these. But within that, there's all these other little valleys of despair, these valleys of the shadow of death that we face on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, hourly basis. And so this morning we were going to talk about what it looks like. How does God help us unpack these valleys of despair, this despair that's in our trunk as we go through them? Because it weights us down. In Hebrews, when he says, let go of all the sin that so easily entangles us. You know what a sin that entangles us, that doesn't get a lot of play on TV? Well, right now, not a whole lot of sins are getting rebuked on TV. But you know what we don't talk about in churches much? We'll get on top of the real big sins and we'll rebuke them. And we'll say, we shouldn't be greedy and we shouldn't be, all the other stuff. And I don't want to call them all out because, I'm being spineless for just a second, which is odd, but this is a huge sin. Despair is because one of the things that we are told by Jesus, don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't be sad. Don't, fear not. All of those things He tells us, don't live in a constant state of despair, and yet we do. We find ourselves holding on to this one piece of luggage that causes us to be unable to go through this living journey as God has intended. And you know the thing about despair, you know the thing about just this gloom, it doesn't really keep us away from God as much as it keeps others away from Him. Here's the point I'm making before we get into the practicality of this sermon. Ask yourself this. If you're sharing your God, the God, there's no God like Jehovah. If you're sharing your God with people that you're around on a weekly, daily basis, what is it about your life that would make them want to serve your God? Think about that. I mean, what is it? Do you particularly have a smile on your face? Do you particularly have a positive outlook on what's going on and how you respond to it and where you're headed? Not just heaven, but just in life in general. What would make people, see, despair is one of those things that people are like, you know, those Christians, I don't want to be like them. All they are is doom and gloom. All they are is you know, if you came home, you know, we'll pick on, let's see, who can we pick on? We'll pick on Tim. Tim's already been up here. If Tim comes home, Denise, and says, well, honey, we won the lottery. You wouldn't believe him, would you? Probably because Tim doesn't buy lottery tickets. But if Tim was a lottery ticket buying kind of guy, and he came home and said, hey, pack your stuff, we're going to Tahiti, we won the lottery. You wouldn't start packing. But if Tim walked in the house and just, you know, all of a sudden was like, yes! Woohoo! Pack your stuff, ladies, we're going on vacation. You would call somebody, wouldn't you? You would do something. You wouldn't just stand. That's how people respond to us because of the last word on that slide. Because we're like, well, I'm going to heaven. Oh, really? You sound thrilled. You look thrilled. We're not thrilled. We're full of this. I mean, we're scared to death. Scared to live the life to the fullness that Jesus Christ put on this flesh to give us. Well, I mean, we are. And if you don't believe me, just look around, because we are so unable to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every living creature because we are afraid of getting some part of it wrong, or the fact that we'll find out that we really don't believe it anyway. So how do we unpack this? How do we drop this despair so that we can live the life that Jesus has lived and died and was raised for us to live? The first thing we have to do, we have to remember in dark valleys that they're inevitable. Always remember that don't be shocked when things go wrong. When you have a plan and that plan goes haywire, when you have a retirement plan or a health plan or a relationship plan or whatever that is, if you have a daily and something goes haywire and you get disappointed or something happens and your heart is broken, realize that we live in a broken world with broken people, and valleys are inevitable. We're never, ever, ever going to be able to live in such a way, to decide in such a way, to study enough or to be careful enough to avoid difficult times. We're not. They're inevitable. John chapter 16 and verse 33 is a very succinct statement. In this world, you will have trouble. The end. And that doesn't go for just Christians. Now, Christianity in a broken world, sometimes, most of the time, well, Jesus said it's gonna, will compound those troubles. But John says, in this world, you will have trouble. Remember, valleys are inevitable. If we understand that, then we can start to accept the reality of them sooner rather than later. Not only are valleys inevitable, but valleys are unpredictable. You can't see them coming, and you don't know what's going to happen when you're in them. When there's valleys of despair, when there's dark times, when there's brokenness, it's not, the world's not going to respond the way that we think it is. Even if it responded that way the last time I went through this, there's a real good chance that the world's going to respond differently the next time. Not only are they inevitable, they're unpredictable. In Jeremiah 4 and 20, disaster follows disaster. In an instant, my tents are destroyed. My shelters fall in a moment. He's saying, you can set everything up the way that you're supposed to. You can set everything up the way that you plan to. And dark times, broken times, not only are they inevitable, but you can't predict, yes, this is when right here is all going to fall apart. This is when the storm is going to come. I mean, think about that analogy for just a second. There are teams of people with PhD educations forecasting the weather. And they get it right less than most of the time. How predictable are storms? I mean, we can see systems approaching, and you've got this warm front coming out of the south, and the east pushing north that way, and all that's going to happen. And you know what they can tell us? Man, it might rain on you today, might not. In this general area of 300 square miles, there could be rain. Okay, thank you. Isn't that great advice? But guess what? No truer words have ever been spoken. We don't know where it's going to rain, but we know it's going to. They're unpredictable. Not only are they inevitable and unpredictable, but the difficult times are impartial. In Matthew 5 and 45, Jesus says, it's gonna rain on the good and the bad. There's gonna be sunny days for the bad people and sunny days for the good people. And there's going to be death and destruction for the bad people and the good people. He said that the brokenness of this world is not shining down on an individual or a group. It's impartial. It doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. It doesn't matter what faith, family, fellowship, or tradition you belong to. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter what. That the reality of the shadow, the valley of death shines on all of us equally. Equally. It's impartial. There's no one we can be, and there's nothing that we can do in order to avoid the things that cause us to experience despair. But the main thing that we need to remember, the last two, valleys are temporary. You see, there's a thing in here that he says, he goes, even though my house is built in the valley of the shadow. No, that's not what he says. Even though I'm laying down, I'm sitting down. No. even though I walk, the reality is that the valley of the shadow of death is temporary if I choose for it to be. Because not only do I choose whether or not I'm standing still in this, or whether or not I'm shuffling my feet in this, or whether or not I'm walking in this, or whether or not I'm running in it. The temporary reality, it is what it is. But how long I allow myself to stay there is up to me. They're going to happen. And I can't decide or predict when or how, and they're going to happen to me, you, and everyone else. But the temporary nature of them depends on how quickly and willing and able we are to keep walking through them. The problem with so many of us, and me for so much of my life, is that I am so content to set up housekeeping in the valley of the shadow of death. And I think, well, this is just it. This is where I'm at. I guess, I paint, maybe. Maybe, this is terrible. I'll just put some carpet over this. You know what this valley needs is some surround sound. That's what this needs. That's what we do. We set up housekeeping in the valley of death, in despair, and all that. And we just think, well, this is life. It's a part of it. It isn't the whole. We walk through this thing. We don't dwell there. They're temporary. You see, our worldview has to have this in it. And you hear this on bumper stickers, whatever God brings you to, He'll bring you through, and all of those things. Yeah, there's some bad theology in that, because I don't know that God's bringing us to that, because the brokenness of this world is not His idea. But the last part of it, God will bring you through it if we will let go of it instead of just clawing on for dear life. Not only are they temporary, but thank God, they're purposeful. You see, Peter, and what started this whole series in 1 Peter chapter 1, he says that you might go through, remember this, what I believe is Peter being sarcastic when he says, you might go through some fiery trials. You think? They're catching us on fire, Peter. They're burning us alive. What are you talking about, fiery trials? He says you might go through some fiery trials, but at the present, you may be temporarily harassed by all kinds of things. This is no accident. It happens to prove your faith. Remember what James said? He goes, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds. Same word there, fiery trials. Whenever Satan is trying to burn you alive, can you think of anything more despairing than that? He said, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kind, because the testing of your faith develops perseverance, and perseverance must finish its work, and anyone who lacks anything should ask from God, who is impartial and gives to all. You see, the despair, the valley of the shadow of death that we go through is not on purpose, but for a purpose. And that purpose is so that no matter what it is, we can walk head strong, head up, chest out, right through it and saying, God, bring it on, Satan. Because he who is with me is more than he who is with you. Remember us talking about that out of the life of Elisha when the Arameans had them trapped, and they said, would that he would open your eyes so that you can see what I can see. Because those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And if I understand that it is for His glory, remember that part? He says that He guides me through paths of righteousness for His name's sake. And when we go through those valleys of the shadow of death, we can go through them proving that God is who He says He is, because I will not be scared or dismayed or hindered in any way on this path of righteousness. That's what it's about. It isn't so that we can sit around and have support group after support group of just mulling over and stewing in our own juices of sadness and gloom and, oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. I mean, guys, it's not really a handbasket as much as it is a rocket sled. But you know what? We're not going there. We're not going there. We're not living there, and we're not going there, because we are in the kingdom of heaven now, and we will be in the kingdom of heaven with God forever. And that's enough for us to be like, oh, valley of the shadow of death, is this all you got, Satan? Bring it. Is this it? I really thought the valley of the shadow of death would be scarier than this. Well, okay, I'll just keep going. The purpose is for God to be seen who God truly is. So what do you do? What do we do? The first thing we do, refuse. Do not tolerate behavior from yourself or those in your circle of influence that would keep you in a state of despair. Refuse it. Refuse to be discouraged. Refuse to be downcast. Refuse to have your hope taken from you, to have your joy tarnished in any way. Refuse it. I tell my kids that a lot when they call me, my adult kids and my kids. I tell them, don't tolerate that behavior out of yourself. When things are going bad and it's woe is me or this or that or whatever, or even if it's sin, even if it's lying or, whatever it is. Like, you have to be the one to refuse that. Something bad happens, there's a death, a relationship, whatever, something happens. Yes, allow yourself a time of mourning, a time of grief, a time of processing that. But then there is a point in life when you say, you know what, that is behind and I'm striving to what is ahead, and I will not tolerate a lifestyle of despair from myself. I refuse to be discouraged. I refuse. And at some point, your refusal will pay off in dividends, because the Bible tells us, resist Satan and he will flee. Resist him. The problem is that so many Christians don't resist him. We try to make a deal with him. We try to negotiate. Remember, this whole thing started back in the garden when I said, when we're going up against Satan, we are outmatched, outwitted, and outsmarted. So refuse to engage in the fight. Resist him. Resist him. First thing we do is refuse to be discouraged. The next thing, not only to refuse, but we remember. What does he say? Though I walk through, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. For you are with me. Remember, one of the things that I think that we need to understand, and maybe write this down and keep it in front of us, is that word. So many times throughout the Bible, that word shows up, whether it be Samson or David or Jeremiah or the prophets or Elijah. It's like they remembered, Hosea remembered the word of the Lord. So many times we have, and maybe that's a prayer. God, remind me not to forget. I have to tell Vic that a lot when she sends me on errands. I'm like, okay, and Tammy understands this. Debbie knows it better than just about anybody in my life. You got to remind me not to forget. Yes, I do chapel for the preschool on Wednesdays and Thursdays at 11:50. I need to be in here doing chapel. We sing, we say the pledge, we do all those stuff. It's great. On Tuesday, Tammy needs to start reminding me, chapel's tomorrow. And then on Wednesday morning about 10, I get a text, don't forget about chapel. And then I get another text about 11, hey, chapel. And you can't really do a voice on text, but I imagine that because Tammy's always happy, she's like, hey, chapel. Now, when Debbie texts me, it's, hey, chapel, moron. I've known her longer. It's just chapel with like exclamation points and then that face. Urgh. We need that. We need to remember. Because we forget. We forget the very important reality that God is with us. That's not a joke. That's not a lie. That's not just a bumper sticker. It's the truth. He came and tabernacled with us, lived with us, took on flesh. God knows, and He will strengthen us. We have to remember. Because that's how we keep walking. That's why we keep walking. Remember, God is with us. And then rely on God. You see, that's the thing, is that so often our train of thought, whenever something bad happens, whenever there's calamity, whenever there's sadness, whenever there's weakness, is that, on the occasion that we do remember, think, oh, God is with me. Okay, I'm going to pray. And I think, okay, God, please, do this, do that. Okay, and then as soon as we open our eyes, as soon as the in Jesus' name, amen, happens, we think, okay, now what am I going to do? How am I going to get out of this? How am I going to overcome this? But He doesn't say, for I am with you because you're so smart and I'm proud and I'm just cheerleading you on. See, that's what we think God is that as we figure this out, God's over there going, go, 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 you can do it. That's not what He's doing. He says, remember, I am with you, and what? My rod and my staff. That's what's getting you through this. My rod of correction, my staff of guidance. You see, if we rely on God, a lot of times we get out of the valley of despair, we get out of the calamity, the weakness, the sin, whatever it is, quicker when we rely on God because of that correction. Because most of the time, the despair is self-inflicted. There's typically a besetting sin that we won't let go of, that God just needs to purge out of us, to correct out of us, to remind us, this is what's causing that. Your relationship, God, I'm married. Your relationships are the way that they are because of maybe there's some selfishness, maybe there's some envy, whatever that is. That rod of correction, we got to rely on God to correct us sometimes out of that and then guide us. He's like, look, maybe that relationship is toxic and you need to get away from it. Maybe that job is maybe your focus is on so much of this world, and I need to guide you away from that. There's so much to this if we're willing to walk through the valley of the shadow of death and not live there. And all this comes back to the main thing of letting God be God. The last thing we need to realize. This is all about God, your God. You see, there's so many people like Shane, but there's no God like Jehovah. There's no God like Him. If we want to live the triumphant life that God has in store for us, the life that Jesus proved is possible, not the comfortable life, the triumphant life. Not the easy breezy, go through life with not a care in the world, but the triumphant life. Do we need to refuse discouragement, refuse to live in this world of despair? Remember that God is with us and it's for His glory. And that He guides us and provides for us. This morning, I want to invite you to a week better than the one you just had. A week of going through this life triumphant, letting God be God. We're going to stand together. We're going to sing Change My Heart, O God. And for some of us, maybe just, sing out with all of your heart, with all, or maybe you just need to close your eyes and let the words just wash over you. As you allow God to prepare you for a week that is going to be broken, that is inevitably going to have ups and downs, but ultimately God will bring you through triumphantly. And if you need specific prayers of this church, we've got Eric in the back, Grant's in the back, I'll be up front. Come find us either during the song or after or throughout the week, whatever your need is. Let us know as together, let's stand up together and let's worship God.